When disappointment teaches you what loyalty never did. When broken promises sharpen your discernment. When human hands fail and only God remains steady. This is not bitterness. This is awakening. This is the moment your trust changes hands.
Jeremiah 17:5. Cursed is the one who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength. Brother, this wasn't the season where people hurt you once. This was the season where they failed you repeatedly. You trusted, you believed, you leaned, you opened your heart, and slowly, that trust became a weight your spirit could no longer carry. You didn't stop trusting people overnight. It happened moment by moment. A promise not kept, a word broken, support that vanished, loyalty that dissolved under pressure, presence that disappeared when you needed it most. And each time you adjusted your expectations, lowered them, explained them away, made excuses for people who never showed up for you. Until one day you realized you were bleeding because you kept leaning on broken pillars. Psalm 118:8. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. Brother, this wasn't about anger. This was about awakening. You began to see people clearly, not with hatred, not with bitterness, but with truth. You saw how quickly loyalty fades when convenience disappears, how fast words change when pressure arrives, how easily people choose themselves over responsibility. This didn't make you cold, it made you wise. There was a moment, quiet, painful, undeniable, when you stopped expecting people to save you. You stopped waiting for validation. You stopped begging for understanding. You stopped chasing loyalty from those who never had it to give. And that moment hurt because hope died there, but something stronger was born. Micah 7:5. Do not trust a neighbor. Put no confidence in a friend. Brother, God was not teaching you to hate people. He was teaching you where not to place your foundation. Human strength collapses. Human promises shift. Human emotions change. Human loyalty has limits. But God does not fail under pressure. This part of your life was not about abandonment. It was about transfer. The transfer of trust from unreliable hands to unshakable ground. You didn't stop trusting because you were wounded. You stopped trusting because you were growing. And the moment you released your grip on people who couldn't hold you, God stepped closer. Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Brother, there is a quiet shift that happens when you finally stop leaning on people. Not anger, not resentment, not isolation. Surrender. You didn't walk away from people because you hated them. You stepped back because you were tired of collapsing when they failed. And in that space where human support disappeared, God made himself undeniable. At first, trusting God felt unfamiliar. You were used to texts, used to voices, used to reassurance from faces you could see. But God doesn't comfort like people do. He stabilizes. He doesn't promise to stay close. He remains. And slowly, you began to realize that what you lost in human reliability, you gained in divine consistency. Psalm 27. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord. Brother, people have limits. They get tired, they get distracted, they choose convenience, they protect themselves. But God does not withdraw. When the weight gets heavy, you learn this, not from sermons, but from experience. When you had no one to call, God listened. When you had no one to explain yourself to, God understood. When you had no one to lean on, God carried you. Trusting God didn't happen all at once. It happened when you prayed and didn't feel foolish anymore. When silence didn't scare you. When waiting didn't break you. When obedience felt safer than compromise. You began leaning on God, not because you were desperate, but because you were done depending on what fails. Isaiah 26:4. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord is the rock eternal. Brother, this was the moment your foundation changed. You stopped building your peace on human approval. You stopped measuring your worth by how others treated you. You stopped expecting people to provide what only God can sustain. You learned to stand without applause, to move without validation, to obey without witnesses, because God had become your anchor. This trust didn't make you weaker. It made you independent of instability. You stopped panicking when people shifted. You stopped breaking when loyalty disappeared. You stopped chasing reassurance from those who never had it, because your security was no longer outsourced. Psalm 56:3. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Brother, fear didn't vanish, but it lost authority. Loneliness didn't disappear, but it stopped owning you. Uncertainty didn't end, but it no longer controlled your steps. Because when God becomes the place you lean on, you don't collapse. When people step away, Psalm 62:6. He alone is my rock and my salvation. I shall not be shaken. Brother, when God became the place you leaned on, something inside you settled. Not because life got easier, but because your foundation stopped moving. People still came and went. Opinions still shifted. Circumstances still changed. But you didn't. Because for the first time, your stability didn't depend on who stayed, who clapped, who approved, or who understood. It depended on God. This is where the transformation happened. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened. You stopped defending your heart to those who never protected it. You stopped begging for loyalty from hands that were never steady. And instead, you stood quietly on unshakable ground. Isaiah 28:16. The one who trusts will never be dismayed. Brother, trusting God didn't make you hard. It made you anchored. You became calm under pressure, clear under confusion, steady under attack, unmoved by disappointment. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped depending. You learned the difference between love and reliance, between connection and collapse, between community and foundation. God became your foundation. People became companions, not pillars. Then something powerful happened. You stopped reacting emotionally when people disappointed you. You didn't lash out. You didn't shut down. You didn't chase closure. You adjusted your expectations and kept moving forward. Because when your trust is in God, people can't derail you. Psalm 118:6. The Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? Brother, fear lost its leverage. The fear of abandonment, the fear of rejection, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of standing alone. All of it weakened because God filled the space. people once occupied. You didn't become lonely, you became free. This trust reshaped your identity. You no longer measured your worth by how people treated you. You no longer tied your peace to human consistency. You no longer waited for approval to obey God. You moved when He said move. You stopped when He said stop. You waited when He said wait. And that obedience built a strength inside you that people could feel without you saying a word. Proverbs 29:25. Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. Brother, you walked out of the snare, no longer trapped by opinions, by loyalty tests, by emotional manipulation, by disappointment cycles. You were kept safe, not because people protected you, but because God did. This is the man you became when your trust changed hands. Not distant, not bitter, not cold, but grounded, rooted in truth, anchored in God, unshaken by human instability. And now, you love people without leaning on them. You serve without depending on applause. You stand without fear of standing alone. Because when God is your foundation, everything else finds its proper place.